Lions. Let's go.
All righty. I think we made it. I think we're in. I think we're live. Just got to check the phone here for a moment. Hopefully everyone can hear me. We had crazy storms last night, and apparently it knocked everything off. So everything's a little bit screwed up. And I'm trying to get it all back. It says I'm live. All right, you guys can hear me today. That's good. Let's get it rolling. How's everybody doing this morning? Welcome to the Rise and Grind morning show on a Wednesday morning instead of Thursday morning. So this isn't the normal right now, but we will be adding more days. Since I will be at the Combine tomorrow, I felt it would be a good idea to jump on this morning and let's kind of talk about maybe some of the prospects, top 5 prospects that, I'm going to be looking at tomorrow, potentially. We're going to talk about some free agency news with expected tags that should be coming down the pipe pretty soon. And scouting. What exactly am I going to be looking at while I'm in Indianapolis? My first real opportunity to go down there and scout independently, not for a team or anything, independently, and try to come away with some good notes this time and see how badly it screws everything up for me compared to what I did last year. So we'll see what happens. And I can't tell how many people are in this morning. Like I said, everything is messed up today. Hopefully you guys didn't get too crazy of a storm, but I mean, hail, wind. I mean, it was crazy all night. All the cameras around the house going nuts. Message after message after message of, recognizing this or that. And it was just rain or hail. So anyway, Demigod 313 is in. Who else do we have? We have Rick. We have somebody from Thailand. Good morning. El Tori, Rick, Will Scott, John Desage, Hot Rod Lincoln, Randy P. So we've got some new names in this morning and some regulars. Good morning, everybody. Let's do this Rise and Grind style this morning and try to figure out what's going to happen over the coming weeks. We don't know. Brad Holmes kind of threw a wrench in everything yesterday. Everyone has been high on, getting these high, tag free agents. I've always been in the middle tier zone, riding the middle lane, not so much in the fast lane with these big, expensive guys. And I guess that's just the way I've been for years. I've always thought that, you kind of build, through the draft and then supplement as needed. And yes, it's always nice to have that shiny new, car, but the way Brad Holmes is doing this, I think he's really trying to build this thing for the long term. And the question that I'm going to ask you guys right away is, are you not considering the fact that Brad Holmes hasn't been extended yet? Like, why hasn't Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell had an extension offer yet? You would think that would be high on the list right now for Sheila to get done. Sheila Hamp. And I haven't heard any rumblings. I want to say that Dan Campbell got a 5-year and Brad Holmes got a 6-year, or flip-flop that, 6 and 5, one or the other. And yeah, it's interesting. I'm expecting those guys to get extended. I really hope that they lock up Brad Holmes as quickly as possible, because there are plenty of teams out there that would love to have what Brad Holmes brings to the table. I mean, watching the Lions turn everything around in 3 short seasons. Now, that doesn't mean in the 4th season it's going to be just as great. They're expecting it to be. That's their plan is they want to get better. The only way they can get better from last year is going to the Super Bowl. So they've got a very tall order in front of them, and fan expectation is through the roof. Good morning, Tony Jackson. And Bucky McBadbat says, Will, man, you've been on a 48-hour stream. Yeah, it's been interesting the last couple of days. And we're just getting started. I'm just trying to get the voice trained, because, you come next week after the Combine and you start, moving towards free agency on the 13th, or really on the 11th. It's going to be nonstop streams. It's going to be nonstop breaking news. And that's, I guess what I'm in training for is getting my voice ready. And as you can tell, even today, or maybe you can't, but my voice hurts a little bit. So Is what it is. Good morning, Lone Spoon 77. Bruce Morton, good morning. How's everybody doing? Vegas is in the house. All right. I'd like to be in Vegas right about now. Some good weather out there. All right. So right away this morning, free agency news. Ravens are expected to tag Mailbag. The Chiefs are expected to tag L'Jarius Sneed. And the Bengals have already been in talks with T. Higgins and expecting to tag T. Higgins. So there's two guys off the list. I don't think that the Lions are really in the market for a big-time free agent when it comes to wide receiver. But we've been talking about L'Jarius Sneed. You guys know one of my favorite free agent targets is Mailbag. I mean, who wouldn't want Mailbag? I just... Look, they're going to pay. They're going to pay through the nose to keep the guy and then try to work out a deal, long-term deal. But I haven't heard anything about Christian Wilkins yet, but I guess I am expecting that, he's going to get a deal done and or get franchise tagged. The good news is that the Bills, from what I understand, are letting AJ Epinesa hit free agency. There is no plans to, get a deal done. They weren't even close, I guess, on numbers. And from what I understand, what I read, AJ Epinesa is going to test free agency. So that's good news. And I do feel that is a Brad Holmes kind of move. I really do. It's not too high. Not too high, meaning not too expensive. And I get it. I heard what he said yesterday, that you really have to know these guys. And he probably doesn't know AJ Epinesa. And I haven't had the time to go through and look back at all of the, past drafts to try to figure out, who Brad Holmes has spoken to, what 30 visits has he been involved in, even with the Rams, because those are going to be the years that matter when you start looking at the free agents this year on, who's he going to be keying in on the guys that he thinks he knows. And I said that yesterday too. Good morning, Will. Scotty says, I believe they've discussed behind the scene. Which one are we talking about, Will? And Thailand, I'm sorry, I can't read your name, but he says, he or she says, I've been a Lions fan since 1972 when Greg Landry was the quarterback. That's incredible. So are you in Thailand now? Is that where you're watching from now, or are you in the States? Casey says, with Holmes saying that this year's draft is deep with wide receivers and cornerbacks, I assume he nabs one of each in later rounds and top picks, best player available, regardless of position, other than quarterback. You guys heard me mention quarterback yesterday, and I put that out there in my Facebook group just to kind of be a pessimist, right? Just to kind of be a little bit of a jerk and kind of wake people up a little bit. And I said that the Detroit Lions select Drake May. I thought that Drake May might slip in this draft, but are you telling me that if Bo Nix or Drake May or somebody is not available at 29, that Brad Holmes is really going to pass on him? Again, if it's best player available, you would think that would be best player available. So there has to be a component of need. There has to be, because I can't imagine that he's going to take a quarterback. Now, if there's not a deal done with Goff, maybe he does. That goes back to what I was saying the other day about, is there any sort of competitiveness, with not signing extensions before the draft, before free agency, and kind of letting people sweat it out on both sides. Demigod 313 says, my only concern with Brad is other top players wanting to get paid and knowing how Brad works with the money. I mean, hey, he overpaid Maben, so I don't think it's going to be a problem for these guys to get paid and get, what they're worth at least. Hey, good morning, Braylon Dennis. He says, damn it, Welp. I kind of knew the Chiefs were not going to let Sneed walk. Hey, it's not done yet. Will Scott follows up with contract negotiations with Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. Okay, I got you. Yeah, it could be behind the scenes. I think that we would hear about it at some point. Someone would report it. It would be public news at some point, I would expect. All right, so I think what I want to start with this morning is let's talk about, let's talk about scouting first. And then let's go into the, some of the top 5 prospects. And I made some notes on, some of the things that I'm going to look at And really, this is my first real season doing it, independently like this and really going all in. So here are some of my most important features to look at for defensive tackle. And this is really following up on, Demigod asked me a good question yesterday, kind of what am I looking at? What am I looking for? And I think the question was defensive tackles. So defensive tackle, obviously their weight, vertical jump, power, height adjusted speed score, and their weight adjusted bench and body mass index are going to be, first and foremost before I start to see a lot of their skill. With the running backs, obviously I'm not really targeting running backs this year because I don't think that the Lions are going to be selecting one, but their speed score, their hand size, their shuttle, their body mass index, and their bench are pretty good. I really like to see the broad jump. The broad jump gives you a real good idea of explosion in that intermediate lateral agility and quickness and that explosion to, jump cut left, right. That's what that broad jump helps you identify. With the tackles, believe it or not, quickness, their quickness score is very important. Their speed score is very important. Their height adjusted speed score. And when I say that, like they have these scores that they do, and then based on height and weight, they adjust them. So when you see a 4.40, it's actually adjusted later in some weird configuration that the NFL, scouts use to come up with some sort of a different score and how it compares to the rest of the field. Cool. Watching live in Thailand. That's awesome, man. Appreciate it. We'll call you the guy. Supakit. I probably butchered your name. I apologize. Braylon Dennis says, have an idea. Go get Huff, Epinesa, and Van Ginkel. Contracts would be under 18 mil. Won't break the bank. Yeah, I'm with you, man. Demigod 313 says, Casey reported that they will tag him, but they are willing to trade him if a long-term deal cannot get done before the season or draft. Are you talking about Snead? I thought Snead was a free, unrestricted free agent. Is he not? Are we still talking about Snead? I don't know. I thought he was an unrestricted free agent. I'm gonna have to go back and look here in a little bit. So inside linebacker, shuttle time is great. To kind of figure out their lateral agility and quickness, arm length. Again, you want to get off those tackles. You want to be able to reach, for the tackle as you got running backs coming through the lanes. Height adjusted speed score. Wingspan is a big one in their arm length, like I've already said. Cornerbacks, weight adjusted bench. So I'm not real big on the bench press for corners. Like I could really care less how much they bench. I mean, of course, I would like them to be strong. You want everybody to be strong. But their 20-yard split, their speed score, their catch radius, their height adjusted speed score, and a few other things I'm going to get into because I highlighted corners because Brad highlighted corners. So these are just some of the things that I'm looking at. Defensive end, quickness score, hand size, height adjusted speed score, height, wingspan. But these are all the 5 most important features, I guess, for each kind of position in the NFL. I got you. So they're going to tag him, but once he's tagged, then they can trade him, or another team can make an offer. Well, that would be a pretty high price to pay. Not only are you going to end up paying through the nose in salary, but you're going to lose a top pick. So, all right, NFL Combine. It's one of the biggest events every single season. In the lead up to the draft, scouts weigh, measure. They time prospects in a variety of drills. You guys know this. The fastest 40-yard dash often makes the headlines, and that's really all it's for. It's headlines. How important are these results? I mean, these are the questions that everyone has to be realistic with. And this is what separates a really great scout from, your average fan that's watching the combine. And I will tell you, 10 years ago, when I watched the combine on TV, I mean, I used to make sure I didn't work for those 4 days, and I would sit at home all morning and start watching the combine. I know, whatever, lazy, but I wanted to watch it. That's how much I love the NFL. And I was one of those guys that was more involved in watching the 40 times. Like, to me, that was everything. Oh my God, look how fast that guy is. He's going to be a great player. How wrong was I? And how much have I grown since then, and understanding a little bit more about how all components work together. And now, what the NFL is kind of turning into, and where the league is I guess morphing to, or changing. It's growing. The rules have changed, and what you can do over the middle of field has changed, and how you can or can't hit quarterbacks has changed. Everything has changed. So now some of the things that players and teams used to be high on are not as high as they used to be. Before, you'd want a big, powerful linebacker that was all muscle that could come in and lay the boom. Maybe not so much anymore. Now you need a guy that can cover the middle of the field and not have to go take somebody's head off, because if you do, you're going to get a 15-yard flag for it, or potentially kicked out of the game. So the game has changed, and when you have changes to the game, you have to change your approach with your players, and they have to mold and change what they do to become that type of player that fits the new mold. So, are good performances in some areas more important than others? I believe so. And that's what I'm saying. I think that the broad jump is a telling component to the combine. I think that, the 3-cone, the shuttle, the individual drills, with the cut bag or, high knees, how you can tell how quick someone's feet are. And I'll touch on that with the corners too. A lot of that stuff really weighs heavily now, as to where maybe 10 years ago it didn't. Rady P says, right on. The big complaint on Brian Branch was his 40-yard dash time, but that dude played lights out. So you're spot on, man. I mean, there is a difference between your flat line, and I'm going to touch on that in just a moment too. I think it'll all come full circle. There is, a difference between your flat line straight speed and your game speed and how you play. Big difference. And you may not realize it while you're watching the game, whether live or on TV. But in a minute, I'm going to make this statement again, but I want you to go back and think right now, how many times does a cornerback run straight down the field in a straight line? I'll let you guys answer that. Donovan Amos says, Snead is off the board. Time to get Kendall Fuller and a Woozy. I do like a Woozy. Kendall Fuller would be probably third on my list right now. All right. So, can these results be used to quantify a player's chances of success in the NFL? And I would say that the answer is yes. It's limited, but yes. And analytics-based approach can definitely give us the answers to some questions, and sometimes even a little bit more about players. We understand a little bit more about players. So the first score or test that I'm going to talk about is the RAS score, the RAS, Relative Athletic Score. Jack Campbell had the highest RAS score of all players last season. I think it was like 9.96, extremely high. It's simply a look at the players' testing numbers and were they higher or lower than the rest of the field in his positional group. And then you find that player's percentage, or percentile based on that performance, and where does it stack within that positional group. So if you have a 9.99 or a 9.96, I mean, that's just insane. And that's what Jack Campbell had. I think it was 996. I could be wrong. Could have been 999. To me, it's a new type of scoring system that might hold more weight than a 40-yard dash. And then next is the athletic success indicator, and that's what we were just talking about, the ASI. Can these types of results quantify a player's chances of success in the NFL? And the athletic success indicator can do that to a degree. The athletic success indicator attempts to quantify a player's likelihood of success in the NFL based on the testing numbers at the NFL Combine or even their player pro day. Success in the NFL is usually been determined by looking at a player's approximate value, their AV, over the first 4 seasons. Now, AV you will now find on Pro Football Reference. It gives you an approximate value of that player for that season or that game and what they, contributed to the game. It's a number, I think, like 1 through 10. But the AV is a metric from Pro Football Reference that puts a number value on a player's performance each season. The first 4 years have been used because that is the value of a player's that is the value a player produces over the length of their rookie contract. Now, I understand some rookies will have 5 seasons, but all of them have 4. So the cutoff was made around the 70th percentile at each position. So with slight adjustments up or down when deemed appropriate, but players above the cutoff point were marked as successful, while those below were marked as unsuccessful. So now that's going to be a homework assignment for me. Is now I'm going to have to go through Pro Football Reference. I'm going to have to go back and look at last year's draft and look at some of the top 15 players, and then that were drafted, and then I'm going to look at like the top 15 players of the entire draft. Who were the best players out of the draft, and then go and compare their AVs. Does it matter where they were picked, or doesn't it? That's the question. These are all the little dumb things that I do in my free time to try to understand how teams are going to pick players and who fits. Some of this stuff you won't know because they haven't played 4 seasons in the NFL. So you don't have these numbers available yet. But at some point, you're going to get these numbers, and that kind of gives you an idea if you were to walk everything back and go back and look at their testing scores, their RAS, everything else. And you go back and look at it and say, okay, this player had this much percentage to be this type of player after 4 seasons. These measurables, these combine times, this RAS score, all of this, it fits into this median box. And these are the kind of players we're trying to identify. And I don't know if Brad Holmes does any of this, but what I will say is, isn't it kind of weird that he picks the players that nobody's kind of looking at to a degree? I mean, some players, obviously, Jamison Williams, Brian Branch, these guys would have been picked somewhere, but they weren't extremely high on a lot of other teams' lists. So I find it kind of interesting that he's picking players that are off radar. So I'm really wondering what metric system he has developed. Debbie got 3-on-3 says, so Will, can we look at a 300-pound linebacker or defensive tackle and say he's going to be a good player after he just ran a 4.4 or better? I know people don't take the 40-yard dash seriously. So I think that's what this kind of does. You have to combine all of the different aspects. And I would say this, that even if a 300-pound lineman ran a 4.4 or better, he's going to get picked high just because he probably ran a 4.4, but that doesn't mean he's going to be a good player. It doesn't at all. He might be quick, but what about the rest of what he has to do? Can he anchor? Is he smart? Can he read the offensive, plan? Can he fight blocks? Can he beat double teams? There's a lot of different things that, a lot of different intangibles that go into it too. But as far as just a player performance, the 40 is probably the lowest on the totem pole right now because, and someone just said it, Brian Branch, he didn't run the fastest 40, but he's darn near one of the best nickelbacks in the game because sometimes it's not about speed. It's about what you have up here. And FBI, which I'm going to talk about next, football intelligence is probably the highest mark right now for Brad Holmes and what he's looking at, in my opinion. John Desage says, I love that Brad takes the best football players, period, like Branch and Laporta. Neither were the best at their respected position, but both are the best rookies at their position. Great point. And that's what I'm trying to get to here. So let's talk about corners for a moment, because Brad Holmes brought up corners yesterday and said how much he's, what do you call it? Motion in poetry, or poetry in motion, or something like that. That, he really loves corners, loves watching them play. I think what he was going to say, but he didn't, is, that he might be one of the best at grading these guys and finding the right talent. So he probably humbled himself and didn't say it, but it felt like there for a minute there he was going to say it. So here's what I'm going to be looking at heavily at corners is FBI, smarts, kind of go hand in hand. Hands, hips, feet. That's really it. I mean, I get into a little bit more, but it's your football intelligence, how smart you are, your hands, your hips, and your feet. Those are probably the most important attributes of a player, in the cornerback position, in my opinion, that matter. And I'm going to try to explain why. Philippines on Demand. Hey, how you doing? What's happening? Looks like you just checked in. If you are on the other channel, which I don't think you are, we had some issues with the internet this morning, so I'm not sure what's connected and whatnot. But a minute ago, he said, at some point, you think Brad Holmes would make a big splash in free agency, or is he like Scott Harris, playing Moneyball in football? Great point. I've put the Moneyball moniker on Brad Holmes last April, that he's been playing Moneyball. And I think that Dan Campbell is too, when it comes to the statistical analysis on fourth down and what he's going to do. So good morning. Thanks for jumping in this morning. So we got Philippines in the house. We have Thailand in the house. And we have Brett in the house. He says, good morning, Lions Nation. Good morning, Will. Good morning, Brett. All right. So let me get into a little bit on corners here. I think the most important thing that a lot of people look at is 40 time with corners, right? I think we just spoke about it, that the 40 time really is not the end all be all anymore. Now, back when Deion Sanders played, maybe lightning fast. Some say the fastest ever, 4.2 40. Tried to say he was faster than Bo Jackson at one point. Who was it? Who else ran that fast 40? Was it a running back, 2K? What was his name? I can't remember his name. But anyway, those are like the three fastest to ever run a 40. And the point that I'm trying to make here is, back then, speed was everything. Just how, like I said in the beginning, that you wanted that big, powerful linebacker, Ray Lewis size was everything for the linebackers. It's not anymore. It's changed. And so that's why the 40 time is not as important as it used to be. It gives you a great guide. It puts guys in some boxes, right? It tells you, can they hang with some of the, faster receivers? And quite honestly, it's all about position. It's all about reading the offense, understanding your opponent. And let's get into that right now. So having a cornerback with size and strength is obviously an advantage. I think I think that's a no-brainer. We get that. Adding speed to the mix, and now you have a coveted corner prospect, right? Or no? Seeing how fast a cornerback prospect can run a 40-yard dash is a very important tool. But how does that straight line speed really translate to the football field? That was a question that I asked you guys earlier. And how often do they run in a straight line? I can't tell you that these guys are running in a straight line, every other play. Maybe they're running a diagonal. Maybe they're running down a seam. But it's never really straight. Very rarely are they running in a straight line. More often than not, they're running from the side or they're backpedaling. If they're running straight, then it's probably Jerry Jacobs trying to catch up to the guy that just blew past him, or Cam Sutton trying to catch up to the guy that just blew past him. I don't want to see guys running in a straight line, because that means that they're playing from behind. Sorry, I had to throw that in there. No, I'll be driving, Donovan. It's only like 3 hours away for me. 3.5, maybe. All right. So seeing how fast a cornerback prospect can run a 40, it's a very important tool. But I'm questioning the straight line speed and how it relates to the football field, right? So how about arm length? Arm length is very important to me. And you guys know that. I've been talking about it with the offensive line, the defensive line, and now I'm going to talk about it with corners. I would dare say it is much higher on the list than their actual height. You can see that some players, I'll use Bruce Irvin for an example. I want to say he was 6'3", but he had like 36-inch arms. Aiden Hutchinson is like 6'7", and he has like 32-inch arms. That should be flip-flopped. You would think the 6'7" guy would have the 36-inch arms, and the 6'3" guy would have the 32-inch arms. You would think. So I'm using those, analogies with those two players because, if you have a corner that is 5'10", but he has a wingspan like he's 6'3", then I would say that his actual height is less of importance than his wingspan. I mean, they use their arms and their hands the majority of the time, right? I mean, that's one of the main jobs of a corner is to get your hands on the ball, break up the pass, jam at the line. So, in my opinion, if a player can manage, to have a wider wingspan than what is considered normal for their height, I think that is a huge bonus and something that I pay great attention to. Chris Johnson, there you go. Thank you for reminding me. Just couldn't think this morning. That's right, Rick. If they're running in a straight line, then their guy just beat them. John Desage says 40 times I think are kind of overrated. I'll take a baller that runs a 4.45 over a 4.3 guy that's not a baller. Exactly. Smart guys. I'd rather take a smart guy all day. Demigod says we give Brad Holmes passes for the moves he made, but when are we gonna hold him accountable for drafting a player and making them play out of their natural position? Yeah, I don't know if that was a Brad Holmes move rather than an AG move. If we're talking about James Houston, if I'm reading the room. Back to this, though. So a cornerback's hands, it's next on the list. Very, very important when pressing a wide receiver at the line of scrimmage. These are some of the things that I'm looking for right away when I'm going to be, taking a look at the corners this weekend is their hands, getting their hands on the receiver at the line of scrimmage and fluidity, swivel hips. Right, it's what we call them, swivel hips. Very instrumental in keeping up with the wide receiver at the NFL level. I call it a flip and run. How quickly can they go from a back pedal to a flip and a run, or a flip in lateral, either way, to jump in front of the ball. When a wide receiver's coming down and they do their breakdown, at that point, that ball's coming. How quickly can you break, swivel and get your hands on the ball? Or get level with them on their direction that they're headed. Those are the things that I look for. And the great Bill Walsh, he used to say that if he only saw a quarterback's feet, he could tell you if the pass was accurate or not. It's pretty telling of what footwork does. And in the same light, here if you could only see a cornerback's feet, you can often decide if he has what it takes. There is a lot of footwork technique that goes on in the DB room, and depending on what style of coverage is being played, depends on what type of technique is being utilized. But moreover than that, you want an athlete who can get his feet off the ground as quickly as possible. And of course, back down to the ground as quickly as possible. You don't want a player with slow feet or heavy feet. As in this position, Bill Walsh calls that the kiss of death. And that's kind of where I'm at today. So it's, what did I start with? Hips, football smarts, FBI, hands, hips, feet. Now you could lump arms in there with hands, but it's hips. How quick can you spin and swivel? Feet. How fast can you get them up and down? And it's not for speed. It's up and down on a break, moving left and right. And hands and arms, do you have a longer wingspan? Do you have good, strong, firm hands to be able to get up and jam the receiver and then make the play on the ball? And then, of course, wrapping up, when you're tackling. And the football smarts is above all else. If you're a little bit slower, but you're extremely intelligent and instinctual, meaning that you can read it and you can jump it, then that's going to get you much further than anything else. You can be dumb. I don't mean this. You can be dumb and fast, or you can be extremely smart and slow. Does that make sense? So you can be dumb and fast and make a play, or you can be extremely smart and slower and probably make the play better. And I don't mean that negatively in any way. It's just an analogy. Denzel Vance says, it's really about players' game speed. I think that means you can run a 5-4, but play like you run a 4-3 in a game. It'd be a huge jump in speed, but I get what you're saying. I understand the analogy. Will Scott says break tackling rate doesn't get the attention it should. Demo had an excellent break tackle rate coming out of college. He did. Brent says, yes, Will, football IQ. So, like I said, there's a ton of footwork technique depending on what style of coverage is being played with these corners. But more than that, like I said, you want an athlete that can get his feet, off the ground extremely quickly, on the ground, even faster. You don't want a player with slow feet or heavy feet. Bill Walsh calls it the kiss of death. Here's a few drills that I'm going to look at. I hope that they do these, this weekend, but like the jump cut drill is usually used for running backs. I like to see cornerbacks do it. Whether or not they're going to do it at their pro day or not, I don't know. The ladder drill. You guys have all seen the ladder drill. You put the ladder down on the field and you're going back and forth, in and out of the ladder. It shows quick feet, when you're able to move your feet back and forth in and out of the ladder. It shows how quickly you can get your feet going and how accurate you are with, watching and landing your feet in and out of that ladder. And then the high knee bag drill is probably the most important for corners, in my opinion. But these are all excellent at finding quick feet. In the high knee, you put like 4 or 5 bags out and it's up, over, but it's up, down, quick as possible. It looks like pistons in a motor. That's what I like to watch with these corners, because the quicker they can get up and down and then, shift, swivel left and right and get their lateral agility moving, the better they're going to be in transition. So for me, it's all about having the smarts first, instinct second. And this one I haven't spoken about yet, but they need to have the shortest memory. The shortest memory. Football intelligence obviously is the key here. But yes, I do want to see the physical traits. And there are obviously, some prerequisites that come into playing, the cornerback position. I do believe that a sub 4.45 speed is the ceiling. I'm not saying that I want a 4.5 guy. Like Brian Branch, he's not a corner one because maybe he is just a little bit slower, but he has everything else. But he's just a little bit too big bodied, a little bit slower. So if you can get a corner that, sub 4.5 speed and then starts to check some of these boxes, I would almost take them over a guy that's running a 4.35, 4.3. Now, speed is not everything. I think that's what I'm trying to get across this morning. Smarts and football intelligence is especially important when you're reading route combinations. And here, in the film room, when you're scouting and trying to get an understanding of your opponent and the quarterback that you're about to go up against, and even the play caller, the offensive coordinator. If you guys, are smart in the film room, and that only will help you transition it all to the field. But it's picking up on all of these little things, and paying attention to these things. I mean, the guys that are really good, they're not just studying their wide receiver. They're studying the quarterback. They're studying the offensive coordinator. And they're trying to understand everything about the offensive alignments. those are the guys that, end up being the best in the league. So I would put more value on a corner that has high FBI, is instinctual on the field, has awareness to make adjustments, runs a better 3-cone with a smooth swivel hip, flip and run, flip and run in the chase, quick feet at the line of scrimmage, powerful hands at the line of scrimmage, and then forgets the last play ever happened. So, I would take that over someone that has 23 reps on the bench and a 4.25 40. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm going to key in on, these 10 items, and there's probably 30 different things you're looking at and that you're judging and you're grading. The one thing I will never get is these one-on-one interviews. At some point I'll be able, to interview guys, but it's not like I'm going to be able to ask them personal questions, and get an answer. So I'll never be able to have the stuff that, these guys have. So I can only go off of about, 80% of the data at some point, when I take this up a couple of levels and start putting together some information. Rick says, exactly, Denzel. Quick is fast. Brent says, laugh out loud for sure, Will. A cornerback has to have a short memory. Cruz Hale. Hey, good morning, Cruz. New name in here. What do you think of the corner from Oregon, Tyree Jackson? Good size, transfer from Alabama. To be honest with you, I have not done anything on Tyree Jackson, but I will look at him this weekend, obviously. Donovan Amos says, I can see us drafting a tight end for Laporta backup. I'm in that same boat, man. I do like Theo. And there's some other ones that are available too. Eduardo O'Neill says, hey, good luck this weekend. Can't wait to hear what you learned. Zachary Cleary says, good morning. Sorry I'm late. Hey, that's all right. It's going to be a quick one this morning. I'm not going for 2 hours today. And Eduardo O'Neill says, what do you think about Kalen Carson? I'll let you know next week. I promise you. Right now I've only been able to watch some highlights. I've put out a few of my own videos. I still have a few more to put out. The body of the work comes this weekend. Brent says, I believe so many GMs go to the combine and not by abilities. The combine has screwed up a lot of draft picks. It really has. I mentioned that last week too, Brent. Sometimes the combine hurts you more than it helps you. And I think that's why you're seeing now a transition with some of the quarterbacks who are not going to throw. They don't want to take a chance that they're going to throw to some, Joe Blow that they don't know, and they drop the ball or run a bad route. But here's what I would say. Like, do you not have the confidence in yourself? Because some of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game, they didn't question any of that. They went to the combine and threw to whomever. If anything, that showed that they could go in and make relationships and do it with anybody. And you know what? Some of those quarterbacks were the best in the league ever. Peyton Manning, Eli, even though he won 2 Super Bowls, maybe not the best quarterback, but he was a great game manager. You go back and look at some of these guys that went to the combine and did everything that they could to showcase their abilities. They ended up being, really great at what they do. They didn't care that they were going in and throwing to a bunch of no-name guys. They didn't care. They figured out a way to win. And that's having that burning desire and that heart inside you that, I believe is above all else, honestly. So lastly, what I'm going to touch on, hey, good morning, Steve K. Lastly, what I'm going to touch on is some O-line, because these are the 2 positions that I do believe, could be potentially high for the Lions in the draft, which is DB. So when I talk about corners, you can almost mirror those same, types of intangibles, attributes, and everything else to safeties. But let's talk about the O-line for just a minute. One, if you can bend your knees and ankles, you will always have, if you can't, bend your knees and ankles, you will always have much more trouble with leverage on the offensive line. Of course, having a degree of size and strength is very imperative to offensive linemen to play any position across the line. but I view that it's even more important to be able to have great bend and flexibility. So one of the first, keys that I'm going to look at is agility. Studies have shown that if an offensive lineman shines in the short shuttle drills, that most likely he will be set up well for NFL success. And it sounds kind of odd because that's usually been relegated for defensive backs, linebackers, running backs, even wide receivers. And it would be more associated with, athletes in space that can change direction very well. But what you're seeing now, like even with the Lions offensive system, you're getting a lot of pulling guards and tackles, going whatever direction in the run game. And you have to be agile. You got to have good bend. You got to have some decent quickness. So things have changed. You want more athletic offensive linemen. Demigod says, I wouldn't mind seeing Brad go. I just lost it. Wouldn't mind seeing Brad go after an offensive lineman with the 29th pick. I wouldn't either. I just didn't see anybody that I was super excited about at 29. And I thought that, late second round, early third round, there's going to be plenty that I feel are probably the best of the bunch. But you know what? After the combine, they might shoot up a little bit. So they might get taken at 29. Eduardo O'Neill, I think we're out of the Powers Johnson race. And Barton, I wasn't high on Barton. I did not like his arm length at all. And I went through a few of them last night. If you didn't have a chance yet to watch the live from last night, I went through a few of them last night and then put out some scores. Maybe I'll do a snippet of a video and just throw it out there today. So continuing on with agility, if you think about it for a minute, the players or the offensive linemen, that have to block. The players that the offensive linemen have to block are always making, the big men kind of change directions to account for, extreme athleticism on the defensive side of the ball. The agility has to be a big key. So in a way, I think that the offensive linemen, in pass protection are much like defensive backs in that it's a reactionary position. They're reacting to what's happening in front of them. And, these guys are forced to kind of redirect against their will. They don't want to go to this way or that way, but they have to. They got to stay in front of the defensive lineman so he doesn't, crush the quarterback. And it does hold true in the running game too. I mean, they have to be able to control the defensive line to be able to keep the hole open, which means wherever the defensive lineman is trying to pull them to, they've got to be able to be laterally agile to stay in front of them. Offensive linemen are very often asked to hit a smaller defender in space. And up on the second level or, even out on stretch plays, when they pull, like I was saying a minute ago, it's extremely important to be agile because those smaller guys are a little bit more shifty, a little bit more quick, harder to hit, harder to get your hands on. So I think that being agile and showing the ability to change directions in tight spaces and in space is extremely important for the big guys. And you know what? I think if you look at Penei Sewell, he probably does it just as good as anybody. I mean, that guy could have been a tight end if he would have dropped about 35 pounds. He could have been a tight end in this league. He's extremely quick for a 300 plus pound man. So having great feet, again, going back to the footwork is where it all starts on the offensive line. And having great feet is one of the biggest keys. Now, let's see here. Eduardo O'Neill says, I want someone whose ceiling is Jonah Jackson, but can be way better. Who are your picks? So I went over some last night. If I have a few minutes at the end of this, I'll throw out a couple. And Cruz Hale says, I want to trade down to the top of the second and acquire more picks. I hear you. I think that everyone's going to be pissed off if Brad does that. But you know what? This is about running a franchise. It's not about giving the fans what we want at the draft. Just because the draft is in our home doesn't mean that we're going to have a first round pick. I think that there's going to be some upset fans, but it is what it is. I'd rather win ball games. Toughness is my second biggest key for offensive line. I think that the last two kind of tie together. If an offensive lineman has, even the baseline skills of size, strength, athletic ability, he can be very well, let me put it this way. He can be extremely smart, have good toughness, but if he doesn't have agility to go with it, then, being smart and tough, they're just not going to work. So usually, such players are very difficult to get out of the lineup and go on to have very long careers if they start blending, size, athletic ability, and a baseline of skills, together. You're starting to get, players like Penei Sewell, Jonah Jackson, who, he's good, he's not great, but he's still somebody that you could plug into any lineup and he'll be just fine. But doing battle in the trenches, play after play after play, and remembering that linemen don't rotate, they are stuck in their position. It's very infrequent do you see them ever rotate. And they play a ton of snaps, every snap on the offense. These guys have to be extremely in shape. And they may not look like they're in shape, but they have to be extremely in shape. Their cardio has to be top notch. It's extremely taxing, on the human body to go through thousands of snaps a season. And you don't get a break. These guys do not get a break once week one happens. They're always playing with some sort of an injury, something. Their feet are always getting stomped on. Hands and arms are always getting swatted. They're always bruised up, banged up, scratched, cut. They take a big punishment. These defensive linemen come in there punching and swatting and doing everything they can to inflict pain on these offensive linemen to slowly break them down so that when the fourth quarter comes, they can finally get that game-changing sack. That's what it's all about. You slowly wear them down until you can have your way with them. So toughness, high on the list. Even though, that the league is starting to dial back on some of the nastiness, offensive linemen are still the enforcers, of the game. They set the tone. And, if you want to have that street fighters mentality in an offensive lineman, I don't think that's ever going to go out of style. I really don't. And it really rubs off on the rest of the team. It really does. Attitude is extremely important, but being tough, being agile, having quick feet, good footwork. And then second to last will be the arm length. You guys know, you know me by now. I'm high on the arm length. Offensive tackles, I like to see 33 3/4 or better. 34 is really what I like to see from, an inch perspective, 34 inches arm length. 9.5 to 10.5 inch hands for a tackle. Offensive guard, again, 33-inch arms is typically the shortest I like to see. The longer, the better. And again, 9.5, 10.5 inch hands. Bigger, the better. Height wise, you typically want to see your outside tackles be in that, 6'5" or better. Guards, probably 6'3.5", 6'4" or better. And these are dream guys. I mean, these are guys that you're not going to find every season. Your center, 6'3", 6'4". Sometimes you can go a little bit smaller with a center, but they've got to have a wider body then. And they can go as low as probably 32.5 inch arms, for a center. They don't need extremely long arms. They just have to be able to get the ball back to the quarterback and then get their arms up and pop and be ready to go. So lastly, at the end of the day here, it's going to all come back to one thing, and that's intelligence. And I think the one thing that you're going to notice about the Lions offensive line is how extremely intelligent these guys are. Frank Ragnow is probably one of the smartest centers in the league. And across the league, I mean, every single player on that offensive line is extremely smart. It's a very cerebral position. It's one of the most difficult positions to learn. I guess when you talk about the center position, the tight end position, the quarterback position, those are probably the three hardest positions to learn. Middle linebacker on the defense is probably the hardest, in defense. And then I would say, your strong safety could potentially be the second hardest to learn. So an extremely cerebral position, playing on the offensive line, communication, on the offensive line has to be top notch. They have to know what each other's thinking. They have to be able to communicate in ways, through hand checks, motions, whatever. And they have to have the ability to decipher who's going to block who and quickly decipher, a wide array of defensive concepts. When these guys, are shown with the front from the defense, it changes like that. And that they're disguising what they're doing. So, when Frank Ragnow calls out, who the mic is or, what the front is or, what the offensive line is supposed to do, that can all change in a heartbeat. And they've got to be able to recognize it, make the call almost instantly, almost as the ball is being snapped, and they're already doing something different. So I've never played the position, obviously, but the more you read about what these guys do, and it's just incredible. But as much as any position on the field, technique is super important for offensive linemen. But this especially goes for understanding the best angle to take on any given block. With hand usage, it's also important for smart linemen to study and understand their opponent week to week. I mean, you have to know what these, D tackles, D ends, linebackers, where do they like to go? What downs do they like to rush on? What type of techniques do they like to use? In the passing game, great offensive linemen will study their opponent much like a hitter, studies a pitcher. So these are all, extremely important things. You've got smarts, arm length, toughness, agility, footwork. Those are all the things that I'm going to be looking for this weekend. And of course, speed is a factor on the offensive line because we use so much of the zone blocking scheme and pulling offensive linemen to help in the running game. So let me get to some of your statements here. Rick says, I wouldn't be surprised if we hear the trade chime at 29. And he says, I wouldn't be upset about it either. Eduardo O'Neill says, question for you. If you are drafting best player available and your two best guys are available and they both have the same grade, one on defense and one on offense, who would you prioritize? In this draft, are we talking first pick, second pick, third pick? Which pick are we talking? If you're talking first pick, I'm going defense. If you're talking second pick, I'm going offense. Offensive line. Mike, the Marine guy, Gunny, hey, good morning. He says, howdy, Will Rock and Lions Faithful. Lions Faithful, good morning. Debbie got 313 says, if Brad Holmes goes after a wide receiver, please draft a 6'3" guy. There we go. Who can get first step separation like Devontae Adams with speed. I like where your head's at, man. We do need a taller guy. I do like the Brendan Rice, the Leggett. I do like him too. Demi got 313 says, ooh, we know Lions offensive line is physical too. I'm surprised they don't get a flag thrown at them. It's a pretty good season as far as penalties went. I felt like the Lions played pretty clean football this entire season. And I felt like we did okay with the refs. I mean, outside of the Cowboys game, I think that they did okay. I think that we had a pretty good season, overall. I wasn't really, jumping up and down a whole lot in a lot of these games. I mean, there's a few questionable things, a few things that were missed. But outside of that, I think it was a pretty good season. Eduardo O'Neill says, Frank helps Goff more than we know. I don't know if that's true, but Frank is an incredible asset to this team without a doubt. Demigod 313 says he makes the center position look easy. Has he even made a mistake yet? I don't know. And he said, I don't think ever. Rick says, if Brad used every draft pick on offensive linemen, I'd laugh at the league. You know what's funny? I mean, hey, he could do it. We are in a hole. Like I said last night, I still got this pulled up. When you look at the offensive side of the ball, we have Taylor Decker, Frank Ragnow, and Penei Sewell. Behind them, at left guard, we'd have Coyote Ewosika. At right guard, we would have Colby Sorsdahl. I can't imagine those two being starters this year. And who's going to back up the rest of the guys, if they get banged up? You've got to expect at least 1 or 2 games. It happens every year. So we could literally use 3 offensive linemen. A tackle guard, a guard, and a center guard. If that makes sense to you. Let's see here. Bruce Morton says, I'm going Saturday to the combine. Cool, man. And on Eduardo O'Neill says, I'd be looking at Decker's replacement pretty soon. All of the key NFC North pass rushers run laps around him. Can't be having that on the blind side. Yeah, I think that Decker's probably due for an upgrade here after, his contract is done. I could never see Decker being relegated to a backup position. So I think for that reason, he's got kids now. He'd probably retire. He's had a pretty good career. I don't think he's hurting for money. And I can't see the Lions paying him another big contract. Demigod 313 says, I think he's drafting a replacement on the offensive line in the second round. I do too. I think he's going to try to maneuver and get a few extra draft picks, honestly, because this draft has a few great offensive linemen in it, in the middle part of the draft that would be very beneficial to have now, especially given, what we have for backups is just not, it's not good. All right. Let's not get our hope up thinking Brad will go defense heavily. I think he cares more about the trenches than any other position. I do too. And that's why I think that defensive tackle and defensive end are still on his list. It's just, are they going to be available? Let's talk about some top 5 prospects for just a moment. So how did my review here go over corners and offensive line? I mean, does it make sense, as to what I'm going to be looking for? And do you guys have any suggestions for me? Do you have anything that, could help me, identify some key players a little bit easier? The one thing I don't have is a stopwatch, and I've heard trying to use your phone is a pain in the butt. So I do need to get a stopwatch. Let me save this document here. What I really need to find is a scouting book. Start listening to some scouting books. All right, so let's look at a couple of top 5 prospects. Well, first I want to review this article real quick. So, The Athletic put out an article 5 hours ago, and it was titled "What Lions General Manager Brad Holmes Wants in a Cornerback and More Combine Updates." And there was something in here. I want to see if I can find it real quick. They quoted Brad, and I wanted to reread it. Let's see here. Maybe they didn't put it in here. All right, I'll have to come back to that one over the weekend. Anyway, if you've got a subscription to The Athletic, it's a really good article. It does quote a lot about what the Lions general manager and head coach both said yesterday. But there was one in here about Holmes where he was talking about corners. Oh, wait, here we go. So what he was saying is at the end of the day, this is the NFL and teams all have access to the same 40 times, vertical leaps and 3 cone numbers. There's talent across the board no matter where you look. For the Lions, those intangibles can often be the difference between those talents. And for those prospects, it can be the difference between a productive career and a subpar one. And that wasn't a statement by Brad. That was a statement by Colton Pouncey of The Athletic. But what Brad Holmes goes on to say is, I still am a firm believer that this is the true separator of success at this level. I can name countless examples back from when I was with the Rams and countless examples even now within these 3 years that we've been building. But you look at our top players that have been really core foundational players, and they have the intangibles that we're looking for. So it's not a surprise they've had the success they've had. Again, he says a whole lot of something, but I don't know what he said other than, you've got our core players that have the intangibles they're looking for. So he's not surprised that they've had the success that they've had. But what is he talking about? Which intangibles? And what specifically are we talking about with the combine? And, what? I just didn't get it. That's Brad Holmes for you. So that's what I wanted to share. All right, let me move on to some of the top 5. And I wanted to start right away with Zach Frazier because he is rated as a top 5 offensive lineman right now. And this profile is through, I believe, The Athletic. So Zach Frazier, you guys know that he's been high on my list, but yesterday I said that I would pass on him at pick 29. And I think that I'm still going to say that now. But at 6'3", 310 pounds, his profile is that he has a perfect background for an interior offensive lineman. He was a 4-time state wrestling champ in high school. That built-in inner core strength is a massive boon to his work on the interior. His body control and forearm grip strength allow him to latch on to defenders. Wouldn't that be a hold? His flexibility is impressive, and he can get low to consistently win with leverage at the snap, even on quarterback sneaks. His arms are short, which is okay for a center, but he will lose cross-face reps against longer defensive linemen. He won't blow you up with power at contact, but he does have the weight, power, and technique to anchor well in pass protection. So if we look at this compared to what I just shared about offensive linemen, let's start with arm length. So he's got short arms. And just like I said, you can get away with short arms for a center. They said the same thing, that he could become a center based on his arm length. When they say that he's going to lose cross-face reps against longer defensive linemen, pretty much means that anybody coming, off of his shoulders and not straight on are going to win their rep. And not being able to blow them up with power at contact, you kind of need that. You need that first pop. And that first attack, I mean, you got to win that first rep. Otherwise, the defensive lineman's going to control you. The thing that I do like, though, is that he's a former wrestler. He has good core strength and extremely good flexibility. And as I said in the very beginning, agility is a high key factor to the success of an offensive lineman, especially in a system like the Lions run. So he's got like a large majority of what you're looking for. I guess if he scores off the charts, with all of the other intangibles and everything else, he could be a great fit. As long as, he's in an offensive lineman situation like the Lions where you've got 3 key pieces and all you have to do is fit in between 2 Pro Bowlers on either side of the line, either Taylor Decker or Ragnow and Penei Sewell. That's a great spot to be in for a guard coming to the Detroit Lions. Next on this list was his 3-year data. I'm not going to run through any of this because we kind of already went over some of it. They do have this new metric called stable metrics, and stable metrics tend to be more predictive of future success. So it's kind of like, looking at, I guess not really a RAS score, but anyway, the most stable facets of a quarterback play are those with the biggest sample sizes, even though they intuitively seem easier. Unstable metrics are more volatile when it comes to projecting quarterback play. So as a result, this is what this thing says. As results tend to vary from year to year, his pass blocking grade in true pass sets was a 71. His positively graded run blocking plays was a 73. But his run blocking grade in man or gap style was a 98. And his run blocking grade in the zone was a 95. So he's almost a perfect fit from a run side. Pass blocking, he's average at best. And it doesn't mean he can't get better. But then it goes on to say that in the advanced data, his pass blocking efficiency was a 98.9. I mean, it's almost perfect, but he's tied for 61st in the league. So that doesn't make any sense. It seems like those 2 metrics kind of conflict with each other. Obviously played 3 years of center. He's projected to be a guard in the NFL. But I do like the versatility here. If he does get picked up by the Lions, he would be, a center guard versus he would start off as a guard and be that center backup. But I still think that they'd throw Glasgow in first. I do like Mason McCormick. If I remember, Zach, Mason McCormick is like later 5th round, if memory serves me right. But I do like Mason McCormick. I'd have to go back and look at all my notes on him, though. And then there's Talisi Fuaga. So he's been projected to go in the top 20. And this guy might be one of the better guards in the draft. But he's played right tackle for most of his career. And of course, they don't have anything in here for his arm length. But his offensive line IQ is an 8 out of 10. Footwork is an 8 out of 10. Athleticism is an 8 out of 10. Hand technique, 8 out of 10. Flexibility, 7 out of 10. Power and competitive toughness, 10 out of 10. So he does have some amazing traits. He is referred to as an ass kicker. That's what they call him. His profile says this: Fuaga is the kind of ass kicker every NFL team wants in the trenches. He is a finisher's mentality in the run game and takes pride in pushing defenders against their will. Sounds like a Penei Sewell. In pass protection, his stride length is limited, but his foot speed makes up for it. He has a good wide base to neutralize bull rushes quickly. His hands are consistently up in the right position to strike with power at any moment. He also possesses the hand quickness to hand fight, yet protect his chest. He can be a bit overzealous to make contact in pass protection, which can lead to a vulnerability to swipes and chops. But the patience did improve in 2023. So 6'6", 334 pounds, prototypical size for right tackle. Oregon State Beavers. Talisi Fuaga. I do like this guy. I just don't see where the Lions are going to have an opportunity to get him unless they move up. but he's graded off the map. Again, this is going to have to be a guy that, does really well as far as the rest of the, interviewing process and everything with Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. But I will say this, there is something that I read a while ago, and I don't know Fuaga's background, his nationality, but like Samoan and, Hawaiian, Samoan, and I forget what Penei Sewell is. Is he Samoan too? They make, for whatever reason, some of the best offensive linemen come, from or through that nationality. And I don't understand, why or what sets them apart. But the reading that I was going through was talking about their mentality and the way they're raised and, the types of things they believe in and their core beliefs and kind of what, their, I guess, traits of their nationality, their upbringing give them. So it was an interesting read. I'll have to find it and I'll post it in the description. I can't remember everything that it was saying, but that was the gist of it anyway, that they make really great offensive linemen because of the way that they're brought up. So interesting. I thought it was interesting. I have not looked at Matt Lee from Miami, Steve. Craig Hogg, their projections and analytics are simply BS. Look at Stroud. I don't know who you're talking about. Are you talking about the Athletic or PFF? Last year, I had CJ Stroud as the best quarterback in the draft. I said that he would be the only one that would have a good season. And I said that if Hendon Hooker wasn't injured, that he probably would have been a top 5 pick. Thank you, man. Craig Hogg says, just wanted to take a second and say thank you for your show. Between you and Derek, we finally are getting honest opinions and brutal honesty. Great job, bud. Look forward to your shows. Well, I appreciate you joining in today, man. And we try to give you, the brutal, honest takes, the realistic takes, the fan takes, but it's all done, from the heart for the fan. And I think that's the most important way to do anything. If you do anything for money, you probably won't do it your best. If you do everything for the love of it, you'll probably do it even better. So that's the way I look at it. It's fun. It's entertaining. I love to do it. It's not work, even though some days it feels like it. It like someone said earlier, I've been on for like 48 hours straight. And this is just the beginning of the off season. So, all right, well, that's it for today. We're coming up on the 10 o'clock hour. Do me a favor and check out sportspider.com. That is SportSpider, SportSpyder.com. Their link is in the description. And if you guys want to get all of your sports in one place, please check them out. It's an awesome website. Get signed up. It's free. They're not going to spam you with a bunch of stuff. You can whittle everything down and organize all of your sporting news on one page. And yes, you can even find us there in a featured spotlight with all of our latest and greatest videos. So if you're not getting your notifications for whatever reason, you just go to SportSpider and you'll find our latest videos. They will be up. Also, would like to just say, look, it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. And there's going to be a lot of things going on with Brad Holmes. And I've heard, people saying, we say that we should trust in the process and, just kind of let things play out. And I would say to continue to do that because we may not agree with everything that Brad Holmes does. I mean, I can guarantee we don't agree with everything that Brad Holmes does or Dan Campbell. But what I will tell you is based on what Brad Holmes has done this far, 3 seasons, now entering his 4th season, he has brought this team to a much different place. And it is very, very hard to stay patient as a Lions fan because we've been kicked and battered and down for so long. And no, Demigod, no, I don't see us tagging anybody. We've been kicked and battered and down for so long that we want instant gratification now. We want instant success now. And now that we got a taste of it, we want it even more, right? I mean, isn't that how, great drugs work? And football is a drug to a lot of us. It's It's what we consume, 20 some odd weeks out of the year during the season, and then another 20 plus weeks outside of this, season. We're consuming even more. Passionate about football, and Brad Holmes is passionate about Detroit and the Detroit Lions. He's going to make the right decisions. We have never witnessed a general manager in Lions history do what he's done. He has been highly successful, and there's a reason why Sheila Hamp. You're right, Mile Mark. It is the human way, and we all want instant gratification. It's very hard to be patient. And Sheila Hamp, she brought these guys in for a reason. And now a lot of us probably doubted it at that time too. I'm not saying I did, but I don't even remember what I was thinking at that point because I didn't know who Dan, or I knew who Dan was, but I didn't know him as a coach. And I definitely didn't know who Brad Holmes was. So now that we've realized it for a couple of seasons, what he's able to do, and we've watched, all of the big news media, places rail against these guys, and they've done nothing but win and be right in their respective positions. They've earned, I think at a minimum, a little bit of our respect and patience to just let them keep working. The one thing that we're not going to see is potential big free agent, signings. And I understand it. I mean, I've been saying it for a while now that being a half a season away meant that we needed another draft because that's how we're going to build this team. The core foundation that Brad always speaks to is building your core team. Yes, it's great to re-sign as many guys as you can. There's going to be some that you can't. But he started from nothing. He laid his first brick in 2021. They've got a phenomenal staff, top to bottom, and they keep filling the pipeline with even better staff. With big upgrade so far, in the defensive line. Dan Campbell thinks he's the best one in the league. We're one of the best. And yep, we're going through cornerback coaches left and right, but you'll find one eventually that works. I think talent will help you solve some of those issues too. I guess, really what I'm trying to say here is that this could take 5 seasons before they're really in a position to go heavy in free agency if they wanted to. And I say that because you're building your core. He's still having to get, rid of some of the guys that were left over from the previous regime. And I think that he's intentionally but unintentionally trying to do that at the same time. I don't think he has an axe to grind with anybody from the previous, general manager's picks, but there's a couple of good players that are still on this team. Like, where would we be, without Taylor Decker or Frank Ragnow? Jonah Jackson, I believe, is one of the other offensive linemen. Tracy Walker's now gone. Our long snapper was part of that situation. We're down. I mean, at one point, this roster's been exchanged now almost 90% since they took it over. So that means less than 10% of the players on this roster are from 2020's roster. So it's just going to take a little bit of time for him to get his core, get his guys, and then you keep those guys around. And a lot of them are going to come back year after year after year, and they're not going to be big starters in the league. They're going to be core players, guys that help develop this team, even on the practice squad. You've got to have really good core, players to come in and help your team grow. So just give Brad Holmes a little bit more patience. Don't be surprised if we don't do anything big in free agency. What I mean when I say big, I'm talking the top tier guys. We all want one. I want one. I want a cornerback. I would love to have a defensive tackle over a defensive end. Probably won't get my wish, but I'm still going to be okay with it. And I'm still going to expect another great season. So no matter what happens, we're all in as Lions fans. We got to continue to support them. It's better to put positivity out than it is negativity. The more positivity we put out, the more positive comes back. So, Demicott 313 Says, until they release Will Harris, I can't believe in Brad Holmes nor Dan Campbell. Maybe he signs a league minimum deal and he comes back to be a core player. I don't know. But I hear you. There's some guys that just haven't panned out. Is it fair to say that Detroit is a football city? We've always been a football city. Man Bear Pig says, hey, Will. Hey, good morning, Man Bear Pig. We're about to jump off here in a moment. We've always been a football city. I think that this city's always been that way. It's just that, back when football wasn't so great, basically since 1958, you've had the Tigers that have always been solid and been around. And then the Red Wings took off for like 26 seasons in a row. The Pistons were great, late 80s, 90s. We've had a phenomenal sports city for a long time. But I think internally, this has really been a football city the entire time. We just haven't been able to celebrate the wins. We haven't been able to celebrate the successes because we haven't had many. But if you look at how we support this team every single year and how we filled this stadium and many other stadiums around the country this season, just from getting a slight taste of success tells you it's a football city. So, yes, El Torre, we should always upgrade our players year over year. Absolutely. Craig Hogue says one pride. And Demigod says we hold Brad Holmes accountable this year if the Lions don't finish better than last season, draft wise too. So you mean Super Bowl or bust then? Because that's the only way you could get better over last season. If you're talking wins and losses, dare I say 12-5 is a pretty darn good season. If you go 13-4 this season, great. So you're saying that we have to do what though? Exactly. Finish first in the NFC, first seed, win the NFC title game, go 13-4. I guess there's a few things. It's going to be tough to get back. I think that we're strong enough. We have the right players. We're definitely returning an offense, which is huge. But more importantly, we're returning our coaches. That is the biggest key out of all of this. And no, I don't normally drink Coca-Cola at 10 o'clock in the morning, but 48 hours of doing streaming and my throat's killing me. I need the bubbles. So anyway, look, I appreciate y'all for joining Rise and Grind Morning Show this morning. It is 10:07 a.m. I've gone a little bit over today, but that's okay. Hit the road to Indy tomorrow. We're going to go do some combine scouting. Meet up with some people that should be going down there and check it out. We'll bring you guys some information. We'll probably do a couple pop-up lives and make it a fun experience. That's what it's all about. And maybe next year we'll have a press pass before we go so we can get there on a Monday versus a Thursday. All right, y'all. Go One Pride. Go Detroit Lions. We'll catch y'all later on. I'm not sure what's going to be popping up next as far as schedule, but just pay attention, turn your notifications on. Do me a favor, like the stream, share it, and please consider subscribing and join some of the best subscribers, sponsors, and supporters of any channel right here on Rockdown Syndicate and Rockdown Detroit Lions with Rockdown Podcast Network. We'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.